Welcome to Refirement Life, the podcast for anyone navigating life transitions or planning to make life transitions to ensure your next years are your best years. Listen in for insightful, generous, and sometimes humorous conversation. It's time to get fired up with Christine Zamuda and Muge Wood, your hosts for this latest episode of Refirement Life.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining. This is episode 2 of a two-part interview with Suzanne Malveaux. If you happen to find your way to part 2 without listening to part 1, I encourage you to go back to episode 64. Otherwise, we will continue our two-part interview session.
Are back with Suzanne Malveaux. We were just talking about some of the interesting stories and assignments that Suzanne has had. And now we're getting to a really interesting part of the discussion where we'll tap into a couple examples and situations where Suzanne had the opportunity to spend real quality time with
That's right. 5
different living presidents. We're just going to touch on a few of your favorites.
Yes, that's fine. That's good. All of the, it's going to be anonymous. The book is going to be anonymous if I really tell you the secrets. These are all the rated G versions. Okay. Yeah, for your audience. But I will say that it was just, it's always an honor to cover the administration. Whatever the political leanings are, I just, always, I can only really speak from my experience at the White House. There's been a lot of changes over the years. And during my experience, the White House press corps was really kind of this motley crew of old timers, veterans, wannabe divas, heavy drinkers, nerds, smart people, just like the land of the misfit toys. That's the White House.
Like a good Netflix series.
That's the White House press corps for you that I grew up in. Mm-hmm. And there was a sense of duty and loyalty, right? Because you're covering the administration. You have a sense of duty to hold your leaders accountable, whomever they might be. And we would often, in the press briefing room or in the East Room during a press conference, gang up on the president, right? Support each other, follow each other with a follow-up and a follow-up and a follow-up question, because we had that sense of camaraderie and that sense of loyalty. Right. And purpose. And so it really wasn't a partisan thing at all. I mean, there was
not even a network thing, right? Because you're representing all different networks there in the press corps.
Yes. And then also, might come as a surprise, but a lot of us, are friends. Mm-hmm. And, there's a big exaggeration, I think, in the public about how different we are as journalists. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of cooperation in the White House press corps. When I was there, things might be different now, but when I was there, I will say that it was sad to say goodbye to President Jimmy Carter recently. I was honored to be invited to the funeral, the memorial at the National Cathedral. I took my daughter so that she could be part of that experience. We saw some former U.S. presidents up there in the front row causing havoc.
That's right. Well, well publicized.
We didn't pay attention to them very much. But, the thing I have to say, I would say President Carter really was my favorite. Mm. And I covered him post-presidency, obviously, and out of Atlanta when I was anchoring an international show in Atlanta. And he was the most generous with his time. And the thing I loved about him is that you could ask him anything. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like what a journalist really hopes for, is that you have somebody he was very genuine, very kind. Mm-hmm. And one of the interviews that stands out was he was a spry 86-year-old at the time, and it was Plains, Georgia. So it was his house. Okay. And we did it in his home. And he had us there, and the first part of it was on the record for about an hour. And then he invited us to stay for off the record, and he was signing books, and we just were able to chat for another hour. We sat there and we talked, and he never shied away from any subject. He was actually ahead of his time when it came to what he believed society was ready for
Okay.
and capable of. So he was leading the charge with same-sex marriage, with legalizing marijuana,
Uh-huh.
with climate change, all of these things. He was pushing and promoting for society to expand,
Right.
in its understanding and in its policies before the presidents that followed him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was incredible to me because he was, he was quite old and he was, he was 100 years
Right.
old. He lived to be 100 years old, but
And this is why all of the rock and roll bands really like Jimmy Carter.
oh my God.
Leonard would come to
Yes.
his house. Willie Nelson, I've heard others.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
And so you can imagine his birthday party. So he had a birthday.
Oh my God.
He was not there though. He was not, he was 100, turning 100 years old,
Uh-huh.
but he did, it was in Atlanta and the musicians, right? It was so NDRE, D Nice, the DJ.
Oh my God.
It was the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. I mean, B-52s.
B-52s. Oh yeah.
So they're all
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
They're all there partying and performing. And we're eating red beans and rice,
like
drinking
darn good
champagne.
time.
I mean, that was a party, right? It was like he could throw a party.
Right.
And he attracted, and music was one of the things that he really loved to bring
Mm-hmm.
people together. He felt that that was a way to cut through a lot of the divisiveness. And so that was really kind of a gift of his. But he was able to tackle very tough subjects.
Mhm.
He didn't shy away from any of them. He wasn't a favorite among some of the other presidents because of his criticism of their tenure, right? Their
Mhm.
administrations. He was not shy about going right up to the line, right up to the edge in his analysis and criticism of the current administrations.
Okay.
And so they,
Was
they
that,
have
was
to-
that very public? I don't remember that being.
Oh,
It must have been.
he took a trip to North Korea looking for President Kim Jong-il at the time
Mhm.
under the Obama administration. He did not seek their permission, or it was not a sanctioned trip. So there was a little,
Jimmy's left the country.
a little tension there. He was brutal against in his criticism of President George W. Bush for the
Mhm.
Iraq War.
Mm-hmm.
He was critical, President Clinton and the impeachment, and there was a certain sense of people thought he, was played a morality card,
Mhm.
and but also I think he knew how to critique and at the same time not step over that line.
Right.
But a lot of, but that was a delicate dance that he had to do
Sure.
with folks.
And he held himself to a very high standard.
He did. And one of the things that he did was, so he believed in climate change, and he was one of the first a long time ago to ring the bell and say, hey, we really need to pay attention. And I think it was 1979. So he put solar panels on the White House,
Mm-hmm.
and he famously had a joke about it. I actually don't know. How tacky.
How tacky, right?
Where's the homeowners association when you need them? So he put these panels up, and then he famously said something about, well, this will either be a curiosity,
Mhm.
a museum piece, or one of the greatest experiments that the American people will, be a part of this endeavor,
Mhm.
right? To save the planet. And so it was a climate gala. He was one of the main speakers, and I joked with him. I said, so where are those solar panels now?
Right.
I saw a few in the Smithsonian. And he laughed and he joked and he said, yeah, I have a few in the Carter. He's got a Carter museum. So they're there.
That's funny.
They're all over the country, a couple of, universities. But he, to his credit, believed that you had to have those panels on the White House because he said that's what leadership is.
Mhm.
That's demonstrated leadership.
Right.
And that's what we have to do. We have to show what leadership looks like. So we've got to be the ones to invest and make this something that is important. So we will demonstrate that this is important at the highest level. it didn't, I mean, whether it stuck or not, that's debatable.
He was just before his time, but probably just think without him, who knows? It would have been.
And it was
even
the oil,
more
gas
like-
crisis at the time too. So I think he was really seeing things for what they were.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty bold.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was wonderful to just be able to give him, that respect and his due.
Yeah.
It's such
And what a life of service. I mean, well beyond the presidency, how much he did for Habitat for Humanity and, just being that moral compass.
And he held himself to such a high standard.
Mhm.
He and his wife, they left the Southern Baptist Convention and they went to another church, local church that was more accepting of women in leadership. They, they lived by example.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that he did tell me was about his legacy and what he had hoped. And he did acknowledge that he wanted his legacy to primarily reflect on the post-presidency, that, he maintained the peace, but he promoted peace around the world, and that he looked to the humanitarian service and good that he could do, that was what he was hoping that people would remember him by.
Yeah.
And I think he
He
did.
accomplished that for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Some of the others, it's hard to top, President Carter, honestly. But President Bill Clinton, he, as I had mentioned before, it was a difficult time to cover the White House because it really was primarily about the impeachment and around that whole trial. But one of the things that was fun, actually, was when we were on Air Force One, and he never stopped talking. I mean, he was the kind of president. We're in the back of Air Force One. That's where they keep the press. And it's the only chance to sleep on the international trips is to actually sleep while you're on the plane.
Right.
So you try to get a few hours, right? And he would just come back and shoot the shoot.
Oh, yeah.
And like he would just talk and talk and talk, and it's like, oh my God, some people would like pretend they were sleeping to try to see if he might like leave or something. I mean, he just loved, he was an intellectual, he was engaged, he loved to engage.
Obviously had a lot of energy.
A lot of energy, never slept, I mean, it was really quite incredible to just try to keep up with him.
Yeah.
And I was quite young, at the time when I was covering him. One of the fun stories about the First Lady, Hillary Clinton, I went with her when she went to Russia and 6 former Soviet republics. And so we hit a whole bunch of countries in a very short period of time. And she had this ability to turn it on and turn it off, right? The cameras went on, everything was, quite formal. Cameras went off. It was not
relaxed.
Yeah, relaxed, very relaxed, chill. Very small group of us who traveled with her. I want to say like maybe 7 of us were on her plane. This was one of these amazing opportunities through MSNBC that I had no business being on this, this trip. I was like, oh my God, it was amazing.
Living your dream.
Yeah, and I remember it was just so fast paced and. It was a beast. It was a lot of work in a very short period of time, and it was freezing. Like we were. And that was back in the day when you had the satellite phones that you'd have to come out. They look like suitcases,
yes.
just to make a phone call or to send video, and you had to do it outside. You had to physically find a tower to transmit. So you're outside, your hands are freezing.
Those days.
Yeah, your hands are freezing. You're,
Physical.
Exactly. Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, and you're trying to submit, your reports. So it was pretty brutal. And I remember when we were flying back home, and right before I went to sleep, I told the photographer who was sitting right next to me, I was like, oh my God, it's like, I turned 30 and I was like, I haven't even had time to celebrate, like my birthday. Everything's just a whirlwind. and I fell asleep, and I woke up right before we landed, and there's Hillary Clinton, the first lady, with a birthday cake.
Oh, that's nice.
They scrounged up a birthday cake, found a birthday cake somewhere on the plane, and it's like, oh, okay. He said, I heard you missed your birthday.
Right.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I think,
she
I mean, she
sang
gets such
happy
a bad, she
birthday.
gets such a bad rap in the press. It's just this, nonstop political operative who's only married to Bill Clinton for, professional reasons.
And then there's the other side,
there's the other side, right,
Yeah,
right.
very much kind
Mm-hmm.
and in some ways maternal during that time in my life, with young journalists. And it was
It's
just,
good to hear.
it was nice. It was very nice. But
How
that
about
was
the interplay between the two of them? Did you get to witness any of that between Bill and Hillary?
during one of the most tense times.
Mm.
Yes. You are on the lawn and, they're walking to the helicopter off for their Camp David or their vacation. And it was a very frosty, icy time during that trial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there were moments where it seemed that was, a little bit more obvious than other times.
Sure. Sure.
Back during that time when it was pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's got to be hard to have all of your issues on display for not only your family and friends, but all of America, and never get a break from that in the most
It was
intense
Yeah,
of it all.
that was a really, really tough story to cover,
Mm-hmm.
actually, because it was very demanding, and it just was not ending.
Right.
Right. We took a historic trip with President Bill Clinton to Africa during that time,
Mm.
and there were 1,000 people who traveled with him, the entourage, because it was historic, and we hadn't been in a long time, the country. And so it was civil rights leaders and members of Congress and the media
Mhm.
and activists and the administration. And there were so many there were countries that we did not stay overnight because they didn't have the hotel rooms to
Oh, wow.
accommodate the entourage. But it was that big and that significant.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just being so discouraged when, I was absorbing everything about Africa and the history and our policies and all of those things. And there was so much to talk about. And the anchor tossed to me and asked me, what do the Africans think about Monica Lewinsky? And I was like, oh, no, please.
Like the story's
Please
going
stop,
here too.
give me a break. Yeah, I mean, it was just too much after a while, So that was a very strange introduction, right,
Mhm.
to covering the White House, because that really was the main story, my first main story,
Yeah. And
right, that
how
I
many
covered.
months were you on? I mean, it was years, right? Wasn't it?
That was a very long time. I don't even really remember. I just remember there was a time when a lot of us,
Mhm.
like in the press corps, were done.
Mhm.
Like it was too much.
Mhm.
And it'd be interesting, if the decisions would be the same today. I don't know, but that was, I don't know, it was a totally different time.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that that was a tough introduction, and very unusual. It was a very unusual story.
Yeah, no precedent for that in that
Yeah.
type of.
But I did cover, the Trump impeachments as well. So that was, fast forward to that as well. The person that I covered the most, I covered President Barack Obama, and the beauty of that experience was really watching someone grow from someone who really people didn't know and hadn't heard of, to a national candidate, to someone who really inspired a whole group of people.
Right.
And that was, I lived out of a suitcase for about a year and a half and just traveled with the campaign. And that was an amazing experience. George W. Bush was the person that was the longest that I had that I had covered. And he's just as you see him. There's no pretense at all. And we he's able to answer and deal with anything that you throw him. And one of the questions I had asked him during a press conference was when Nancy Pelosi became the first female Speaker of the House. And we were in a press conference, and I had asked him how was it that he could work with someone who had called him a liar, incompetent, the emperor with no clothes, dangerous. And you could hear a gasp in the room, like, ouch, right? Whoa. And he just looked at me.
Probably like, I've been called worse.
Well, he said in his wonderful Texas accent, he said, well, you know, Suzanne, this isn't my first rodeo. And you know, and then just kept on moving, you know, and I saw like Condoleezza Rice and everybody, they were just staring at me like, you did not just say that out loud. And my phone, which was underneath my chair at the time, was like buzzing like crazy. And I afterwards realized like, oh, you know, this created a bit of a moment here. But he, at the end of the 8 years, he used to always get my name wrong. He always called me Suzanne. Right. And I would always tell his press people, I was like, you know, if you could help him out a little bit, it's, you know, I'm New Orleans roots. It's actually Suzanne. It's not Suzanne. I get it. And they were like, well, you know, he's from Texas. He's always going to call you Suzanne. I was like, okay, but in case just one day might want to say something different. And so the very last press conference, we're in the briefing room. And he looks at me because I've got my hand out, oh, Mr. President, you know, and he's like, oh, Suzanne. And he was about to call me Suzanne. And then he looked at me and he said, Suzanne. Oh, yes, you're beyond just a little reporter now. You've made it big. You are Suzanne, not Suzanne. And then he says, well, just call me George. And I'm looking at him like, oh, no. Now what do I do? I was like, thank you, Mr. President. I mean, he finally got it right after 8 years. It was such a to-do. And everybody's looking at me like, what just happened here?
What's the backstory on this?
It was really
hilarious.
Funny. Yeah. It was like, that was kind of like our last little moment together, was that he got my name right.
He seems like he had a really good sense of humor.
Yeah, he did.
I always love when they exposed his playlist and he had like My Sharona on it. I love to think about him jamming to that song. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That was priceless.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So covered reporting at the White House, reporting in Ukraine and Rwanda, and now it's a new life for you. About 2 years ago, you stepped away from CNN to pursue some exciting projects and be your own boss.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much I love being my own boss. It's like, I mean, all the years, and you know, it'll date me, but I had a pager that I had on my hip when I was living in Chicago for NBC, and I always had a bag packed. I was always ready to go. I could be gone for 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. Post 9/11, I was gone I was living in Chicago. I was gone for 6 months.
Wow.
Because I covered the plane that went down in Pennsylvania. Then they brought me to the Pentagon. I covered the Pentagon for like the remainder. So it was about, 6 months in DC, right after I had moved to Chicago. Yeah. So there was a lot of, breaking news is always there. A lot of uncertainty. It was a ton of fun, in some ways, because it was exciting. You were always learning new things. Sometimes it was very tragic. I covered a lot of school shootings around the country. So just about everything that you can wrap your head around and think about human experiences, wildfires and impeachments, the Florida ballot count, recount, Elian Gonzalez in Miami, Hurricane Katrina, thrown into everything. And it really was an amazing run and a wild ride for a long time. And so grateful for that. But I do love being able to be in my pajamas and watch my colleagues cover it.
Right.
That nobody's going to call me and say, you know what, this plane went down. We need you there now.
Yes.
And figure it out, whether it's childcare or
your life's just
bags packed or
anyone's beck and call.
Absolutely.
Go, right?
And so it's lovely just to have my life and my day and my daughter, who's now 10. I get to participate in so much of what she's doing, whether it's basketball or staying up all night playing Monopoly,
Love it.
Swimming. I get to enjoy her life, and I get to pick the projects that I want to pick, my passion projects. So I am doing speaking engagements, and I get to talk about, a variety of things, whether it's politics, whether it's the administration, whether it's being in the business, whether it's, caregiving, whether it's being a mother, those kinds of things. And also, I'm thinking of a book or two. I think I might have a book or two in me.
You have nothing to talk about. I don't know how you're going to fill those pages.
See, my debate is, do you do it anonymous or not, right? Is it by anonymous, or is it, you put your name on it?
Put your name on it.
I'll put my name on it, but then, you got to keep it clean too.
That's true. Well, you have enough to cover.
I think
two kinds of books.
I think so. So that's in the future, is a book or two. And then I'll tell you about a project that I'm working on for the last 2 years out of LA. For a while, I was doing some travel back and forth. I have a friend who's an entrepreneur in LA, and he's funding the film, and it's basically done. We're going to roll it out. The goal is to roll it out this year, probably over the summer at through the Aspen Institute. They have a couple of festivals and venues that we're going to use to do that. And there'll be panel discussions with the people who are actually in the film. But it is really a journey, because what my friend Mike did in our team is we gave out cell phones to people who live in Watts, out of Los Angeles, a very difficult place to live and to grow up. But we gave out phones to a very diverse group of people. So you had gang members, teachers, pastors, students, mothers who lost their children to gun violence or to gang activity, just a very wide variety of, the youngest being 16 years old, and I think the oldest being, mid 60s or so. And we asked them to document their lives. And
through reality TV.
Oh, totally extraordinary what they came back with. Very painful, some of the stories of people going through homelessness, through crisis, trying to just live day to day in a very dangerous environment.
Right.
The drugs and the gang violence that this is a daily part of their lives, in terms of just getting to school and making it to school and making it home.
Just having that
tremendous challenges and stresses. And they turned the cameras on themselves and documented it. So they came back, and it was just extraordinary. About 200 hours of footage, raw footage, which we boiled down. I was brought into the project after I'd left CNN in a formal way, and worked with each one of the people who had turned the cameras on themselves. We called them creators or directors, and help them boil down their stories. And the beauty of this project is they get to decide what gets in, what gets out. Like, they're telling their stories. And so that is what we do. We just help them facilitate them telling their stories. And it comes from so many different angles, because you're talking to the gang member who, is the one who's shooting, and you talk to the mother who lost their child. who's
Sounds
on
like
the
a
other end.
reconciliation project all over again, but
Right.
in LA.
In LA, right? And so we boiled down the 200 hours to 90 minutes.
Mhm.
And the unique part of the project is not just they're telling their own stories. They get together as a group and they meet together in the same building, in the same room, at the same table, and they create the film with each other. They have these kinds of very tough conversations and revelations about what it is that they're experiencing around the table. And we film that as well, because that is
Part of the
that's
story.
kind of the secret sauce, really, because people are crying, they're revealing their vulnerabilities, they're debating one another, they are engaging with one another in a way that they would never if they weren't sitting at a table making a film. So just going through the process itself creates a whole nother level or dimension of what's happening in their community, because now they're developing friendships, now they're
New
alliances,
perspectives, new point of views.
exactly. And what's happened is before we've even released the film, we've had gang members take the rough cut of the film and show it to other gang members, right? Because they have been changed. They have seen something that they hadn't seen before, that they want other gang members to see. The same is true of the students. The students take this rough cut of the film and they show other students. This has been shown in schools. The police officers, right, who are, I mean, if you can imagine that, right? Police officers and gang members at the same table making a film and talking to one another and, sometimes joking with one another, but understanding where they're coming from. They're taking it to their fellow police officers and showing it to them. So you have a movement that's already happening inside this very small community, very troubled small community of Watts, that is about promoting change from within. Right. So it's not coming from the outside. Nobody's telling them this is what you need to do. Here's where we need to do the funding.
Right.
It is truly grassroots. They are producing what they think are the solutions in their community.
That's so cool. So what a ripple effect. And you
Would it be a model, right?
And you had likely no idea that would ever happen.
I mean, it really was just kind of like, oh, okay, almost like an experiment or something, well, let's just see what happens. Right. And that is what happened. And so it gives us a little bit of hope, right? And that if this could be a model, like, could this actually be replicated in another place? Where you see tension, where you see conflict, where you see communities that are disengaged or no longer speaking or to one another or talking or understanding. And even if you take it on, on the national level, the global level, this is a perfect time to actually see if that's possible.
Totally.
Right. Yeah. And so that's what I hope, right, that's what the takeaway is for this film. It's called Nothing to See Here. And that is, the participants in the film will be talking about it. They'll be on panels this summer talking about their experiences.
And what was it like for you, because you had so much time in front of the camera, to be behind the camera and doing the editing and helping to pull out those key storylines?
So I enjoyed being anonymous.
Did you?
I had my hair pulled back, I had my hoodie on. Nobody knew.
You probably used different skills as well. Right?
I mean, it was wonderful it was very low key. Different skills, I would say. I mean, I think the ability to talk to people is one of the skills that you need in journalism.
Right.
And so that was consistent. I enjoyed not being on camera and certainly, being in the background, helping them tell their own stories, have it come from them.
Yeah.
And that's very powerful.
I like what you said about making this a movement. I think it could be really interesting when the film debuts to have even kits that troubled communities could get, like, or have funding ready to say, like, oh, here's your next 10 cell phones, or or some screening process that they can submit their ideas to really keep it going.
That would be so amazing. That would be so great.
Yeah. I can't wait to see when it launches.
I'll come back and talk more.
Yes, yes, yes. We'll all go to Aspen to see it.
Yeah, this summer.
Yeah. So, great. So nothing to see here. We will keep our listeners posted for when that releases, and certainly make a link to the movie when it's available for everyone to see. You do lots of other things. So I don't know where
Stay
you get the
busy.
energy.
Stay busy.
So the board, the International
Women's Media
Women's Media
Foundation.
Foundation. Yeah. So you're working a lot with the next generation of journalists. What are you learning from them as they're coming up? It's probably two-way bi-generational learning, right?
It is amazing because their job, I think, is so much harder than my job ever was.
How so?
So you have a whole layer of digital social media, which really the scrutiny is very intense. There's the sense of harassment. There's that aspect as well, that the trolling. There's so many layers of protection that young female journalists need in order to do the job.
Wow.
And that's very different than when I covered some of the same topics, right? Whether they were campaigns or being out on the road. There were few incidents where I was personally attacked, right? That is not the case now for a lot of journalists. And so they need a whole new skill set. They need a skill set that we actually provide for social media, so that they have the tools to punch back in the social media world if they're harassed or protected in some way. We provide physical training, security training for female journalists as well, which is not only necessary in, you would think, just war-torn countries, but the past couple of cycles of the campaigns, people have been attacked. And so there's a whole new level of training that's involved.
Wow.
Yes.
That's that.
And well, the impact here is that you have fewer and fewer female journalists who are going into the business. There are studies and statistics that actually bear that out. So we try to promote and protect the courageous journalism that is happening around the world and in this country. And so we have every year the Courage Awards, where we, again, people from around the world who are honored and recognized. Some are in jail. Some are being held captive by their own governments.
Just for doing the job.
Right. Free speech, and which is not allowed in many countries. And so we always honor someone who's usually imprisoned. There are some of our Courage Award winners who've been killed, and we just keep going. That is our mission, to provide whatever they need, and that's in the form of security or funding, recognition. Sometimes it's mental health, if they are in need of therapy or whatever it is that they need. We're an organization that we work very hard to provide it.
Wow, that's fantastic. We need, and we will put a link to the foundation.
That's great.
And I know I have a lot of fabulous people out there who will donate and make this a reality, help some of these folks who are, as you said, they're risking their lives to get these stories out there, tell the truth, and make a difference.
That's right. And sometimes, when you're not on the front lines yourself, you figure out ways to, how do you support those people who are, right? Like those young journalists who are in those positions now. And a lot of them are freelancers. Some of them are with the networks, but there are a lot of cutbacks. And so you have a lot of freelance journalists who don't have the same kinds of supports that you would have as a network journalist like myself.
Right. Yeah, because they're just doing it on their own, right?
Right.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. Want to wrap up with a question as you balance all of these. You have all these hats you're wearing, and I know one of the most important ones for you is being a mom. So like, how do you just balance work, balance life?
Not really balanced. You try, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
good thing is I think that so much of the most challenging times and stories and phases of my career, I didn't have a daughter.
Mhm.
So it was easier, right? Much easier to be all in and
Put your flak jacket on.
go, right?
Right.
And it's so different now, right? Now that I am a mother, and that's why it's wonderful actually to be my own boss,
Mhm.
because I can be that kind of parent, that kind of mother who I'd like to be, the kind of mother that my mother was to me, because she was a teacher, elementary school teacher, Head Start and first grade. So she was always home by the end of school. Like we all got home at the same time. So I was able to grow up with my mom in the house.
Nice.
Yeah, and that was such a gift, for her to be so actively involved and engaged in my childhood. And so it is the kind of life that I'm trying to provide for my daughter. And I'm very fortunate that I'm in this stage of my life. I'm an older mom.
Right.
Which actually is
I like to say
works.
experienced and seasoned.
Seasoned. I'm a seasoned mom, which works well now because I have that time. I have those resources
Yes.
to be able to spend with her. Whereas if I was, still in the thick of things, it would be very hard.
Yeah, very hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of our younger folks can relate to that with the early morning daycare, the crazy
Oh
schedule,
gosh, yes.
the pickups, all of that. Yeah, that's nuts. So when you think about your mom, what's your kind of favorite trait about her, and how would you keep that part of her legacy alive with Soleil?
I think that for my mother, you never know really what you're able to do in times of like challenge, right? Severe challenge. And my mother, when she was 69, was diagnosed with ALS. And as you know, it's a disease that really takes away your abilities limb by limb in different stages. And so when she was no longer able to swallow, she got a feeding tube. And when she was no longer able to walk, she got a motorized chair. And when she was no longer able to speak, she got a word board and started spelling out things, on the
Taking
word board.
every challenge.
That's right. Still arguing with my dad on the word board. And when she was not able to breathe, she got a trach and a ventilator. And so my mother really showed us what courage looked like, what grace looked like under tremendous strain and challenge. And I had never seen anything like that before.
Oh, yeah.
And that came from my mother. And it was a beautiful, amazing thing to see because she grew up in New Orleans, so she was joie de vivre, like living life. Let the good times roll. And she didn't stop, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she did everything in her power to live her best life and to eke out every moment of joy in her life. And so when I think about my mom, I think about like what love looks like, right? And it's not about anything that you do, right? It's like, being able to look at somebody and see their eyes.
Yeah.
Or, touch them.
Yeah.
Or an expression. Or just being with them, knowing that they feel your presence because you're just there. Like that is, that's joy and that's love. It looks completely different, right, than what you think it should or all the expectations that society has about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's what I hope that Soleil, when Soleil met my mom, she was in a wheelchair and she couldn't move. And I take those lessons from my mom. So that was, that's all that was needed in order to show love and express love when she met Soleil, was that she knew I was there for her and, she was there for me.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that is certainly what I hope for her, hope for Soleil.
She has it. I mean, I don't think I mentioned on the podcast, but listeners, Suzanne's my neighbor, so I get the privilege of seeing her as a mom with Soleil. And you're always present and sweet and loving, and
you made me cry.
I feel like I've met your mom through you already.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And that's, you just said it. Like, that's what love looks like. You can feel it. You can feel it. You can see it. It's, your heart recognizes it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
What a great couple of sessions we've had.
I've really enjoyed my time.
Totally. I can't wait. I encourage you to write the book. We want to read it. And I know that we've just scratched the surface on a long and successful and beautiful journey that you've had. And I'm glad you're still using your talents.
Thank you.
To tell us those stories and keep things going. And we look forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine.
All right.
Thank you to all your viewers.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you.
All right. I appreciate you too. All right. We're going to sign off until next time. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you for listening. Our hope is to spark a little joy, inspire, and educate our listeners in ways to live an even more meaningful life. If you have reactions to share from what you've heard, please visit our website, refirement.life, to leave a voice message. You may even be featured in a future episode. To keep in touch, subscribe to our podcast, Refirement Life, using the podcast player of your choice. Always remember, you are never too old to set a new goal or to dream a new dream. Thanks again for joining us on this episode. Until next time.